if if I
You're
do.
not constrained from my point of view.
Yeah. I mean, look, what I'm really interested in is, I won't use his name because obviously we're possibly talking in public, but there's a mutual friend of ours who is very interested in low energy nuclear reactions, cold fusion, and exotic vacuum objects. And I'm writing a book on UFOs, UAPs, and trying to do it as a serious insect investigative journalist, talking to primary sources and trying to break through the barriers of secrecy with some success and some difficulty. But what it has convinced me is that if this phenomenon is real, there has to be a propulsion system, an energy technology that is not yet acknowledged within known terrestrial science. It leads me to the obvious question: is that technology some kind of plasma technology? Because so many of these objects are showing some kind of plasma around them. I've interviewed US pilots who describe this kind of blue plasma over the object which they're looking at, which has no visible means of propulsion, no known terrestrial acknowledged form of lift, such as wings or a balloon lift or anything like that. It's completely and utterly alien. And so I guess I'm wondering whether in your travels, what conclusions you've reached about the plausibility of alternative propulsion systems that might explain what I'm looking at with unidentified objects, and whether you think that we're on the cusp of a propulsion technology or maybe an anti-gravitic technology that has not yet been acknowledged.
Well, I don't know if you saw my How Do They Build Nan Madol?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, I seriously recommend you go and look at that video.
Yep.
On the 31st of December.
Yep.
I really haven't watched much TV during my adult life.
I don't blame you. Most of it's drivel.
Well,
and
I grew up in a household with one black and white TV and 3 channels, and all of it was boring. The most exciting thing was the test card that turned on if you managed to stay up late enough to see it.
I can tell you this, Bob. The thing that I am most excited about is, as somebody who's worked in high-end mainstream media for much of the last 35 to 40 years, I am gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked that the mainstream media is not crawling all over this story. It blows my mind. Because
I'm going to give you 2 exclusives in this conversation, and they are foundational for me. And I have not made these public. So I'm going to talk about those, but I just want to do the lead-in, which was, as I said, on 31st of December. It's lockdown here, and it was, you can't do anything after 9 o'clock outside. So you've experienced that in Australia, so you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And so I thought, God, maybe I'll have a look at some of this ancient alien stuff. The reason is because it just popped up on my Amazon Prime account. Okay, this is not an advert for Amazon. It just happened to be there when I went on it. And it had series. It said that you have access to series 1, 2, and 3. I didn't know how many series there were, and I thought, well, let's start at the beginning, episode 1.
This is Ancient Aliens you're watching. The guy with the weird hair. Yeah.
You know what? I'd like to say I didn't notice that, but I did. But I don't think he cares. I think it's a feature. He likes
a trademark. Good on him.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if
he
I
didn't
had
have it,
hair,
everyone
I'd
would be
probably
going,
make
"Oh my
it
God,
weird as well." So
I'm looking at this program, and I'm thinking, hold on, I already the thing that they're talking about in this other than the fact that the video quality was obviously low definition and stretched to high definition, and it was repurposing a lot of media. That didn't matter so much, as the point was I'd already realized by January 2017 that this technology family would explain all of the megalithic structures. And the slide that I shared in that Nan Madol presentation had several of the, in fact, all of the sites that they mentioned in that first Ancient Aliens. And I'd already.
Can I be a pedant for a moment and ask how you spell Nan Madol?
Yeah, you see, I get this wrong because I only found this out the following day on the 1st of January this year. And I still said it wrong, but it's Nanmadol.
Oh, I got it right. Okay.
Ta-da! Yep. Is my pronunciation.
Is that best found on YouTube?
You can go to the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project channel, and you can see it. In the description, it should have a link to my blog, which is called remoteview.icu, and that is a podcast and a written blog. And if I'm doing a podcast, I almost always write the text down of that, and it's a newsletter, so it can't be destroyed. Anyone who subscribes to the newsletter, they get it in their inbox. So if for whatever reason it gets taken down, the content is still available to all those that were members of the newsletter. So to try and keep some persistence. Anyway, the nature of this second program was about this site called Nan Madol, and I'd never heard of it. I'm 49.
I must confess I haven't, no.
Well, it's closer to you than it is to me. It's 2,500 miles off the east-west coast of Australia, in the middle of, not quite the middle of Pacific. It's 250 kilometers from the US Pacific testing grounds.
Oh, at Johnson Atoll?
Not Johnson Atoll, the other one. The
Marshall Islands.
Atoll. Enewetak Atoll, where they dumped.
Because I've been up there. I mean, it's quite scary. I went there once because we had a corrupt minister of government here who was doing naughty things in the Marshall Islands.
A corrupt minister of government?
I know, it's a shocker.
I didn't think they existed. Carry on.
But we went from Hawaii through to Johnson Atoll, and it's really cool. They make you feel welcome because the plane lands, and there's a guy with a 50 caliber machine gun pointed at the plane. And you're told on the cabin audio, if you get off this plane, you will be shot. It's really, and it's where they were. It's where the American government, the military, were basically dismantling all their chemical weapons and destroying them in huge incinerators. And sadly, for the local indigenous folk, it was deemed a good dumping ground for old nuclear waste and excess chemical weapons. And while I was there, I mean, to my shame, I did the story about the corrupt politician and left town, but it's a tragedy in Melanesia. All those beautiful people are suffering long-term radiation injuries as a result of the exposure that they've had to low-level nuclear exposures caused by the bomb tests 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. And in fact, when I realized what this technology can do most easily, I wanted to focus on radiation remediation and specifically to deal with Fukushima, Chernobyl, and Enewetak Atoll, because Enewetak Atoll is the biggest threat, actually, probably to the Pacific in terms of mass radiation. I know, you might consider it to be Fukushima, but Fukushima is on the mainland, and people can at least be there to deal with it quite quickly if there's something happening. Enewetak Atoll is literally in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, so there's this place called Nan Madol. Now I'm going to go back a little bit in my history, and this project that we set up in South Korea called the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Basically, Martin Fleischmann, I'd love to have met him, and he died 3 weeks before the conference, and so I didn't ever get to meet him. But I realized at the conference, as did 4 other people that were there, that this technology was real, this technology that they called low-energy nuclear reactions. And I could see the thread in different people's research. But the problem is that everyone wanted to win the Nobel Prize. Everyone that got really successful, some investor came from somewhere and basically said, don't talk about what you know. or someone came in and got them to spin plates until they died, and that's the problem. So it wasn't going anywhere. So I thought the only way this is really going to work is if it's completely open. And I've come up with a lot of different concepts with how to do certain things, and I thought I could really do something here. And there was a guy there called Ryan Hunt, whose father had developed a little sort of embedded controller system for monitoring power in houses, and he thought he could repurpose that to deliver what I wanted to do, which was deliver science real time on the internet. Okay. Anyway, that's just the foundational sense. We set up the project. Now, within a year and a half, we had I think our biggest donor. He's been one of our biggest donors for a while. I won't mention his name, but he for a reason, he was running a business that was using heavy oil for a number of years, and vast quantities of it. And given the country that he's from, he took on some guilt for doing that and sold that business and bought into another business that was, he could be more comfortable with. And he's a fantastic steward of that business. And I had the pleasure of meeting all of his staff once, and they basically love him. He's one of these leaders who cares even after someone has left the business and gone to join the competitor. He'll still invite them to the public events, the company events. He doesn't hold any malice. So he's a very special person.
And he's one of the sponsors of, if you like, of the.
He has been one of our biggest sponsors. Because
I was going to ask you, how do you do this? I mean, it's obviously incredibly
great difficulty. Great difficulty.
Are you the only person that run it, or are there other people involved?
Yeah, we've got 3 directors at the moment, and most of the core work the project was set up as a way to test other people's claims. We're not trying to invent things necessarily, although when you get a sufficient understanding, you can at least put ideas into the field, which we have done, and people have acted on those, and they've come back to us. So the whole thing is about this virtuous cycle. And in the case of this particular sponsor, I mean, the people that have put most into the project are actually the project researchers, and in some cases they put many tens of thousands in. And
great.
In my case, 8.5 years, and I came from an extremely well-paying job. Because it was boring, I thought I don't want to spend my life and get to the end of my life and look back on my life and go, I made a lot of other people rich. I was at the top of a business. I was getting a big paycheck, but I was spending it out on my cost of living because of where it was or whatever, for whatever reason. And what have I got to show for it? People like to leave a mark, whether it's a famous quote or whatever. There's got to be some motivation in life.
And please give me faith. Please make me feel reassured about this, because I'm doing something slightly similar in the sense that I've stepped away from a mainstream investigative journalism career.
If you're going to step away at any time, you're doing it at the right time.
Yeah, because I think the whole free-to-air television industry is dying. It's moribund. But more importantly than anything else, it's not engaging in an inquisitive way with the stories that need to be told. And this one, UAPs, alternative energy systems, alternative propulsion systems. I mean, my Luddite brain has understood for some time that there is a really cracking good bloody story there, and somebody's got to dig it up. And I've been waiting for somebody to start nibbling at it. And my friends Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal from the New York Times have done some noble work.
Yeah, credit to them.
Yeah. But the thing that really shocks me is I've just finished a book. At the moment, it's way too long. It's about 140,000 words, so I've got to hack it back. But I'm gobsmacked at some of the stuff I've dug up. And because of COVID-19, I've had to do most of my work over the phone or on encrypted apps or over Zoom or Skype. And the thing that has really impressed me has been how time and time again, what I did was I followed the strategy of people aren't going to want to talk to me if I leave a trail. So if I leave an electronic trail to Joe Bloggs, the the scientist who's probably working on anti-gravitic technology, he's not going to want to talk to me. So I found, with the help of our mutual friend in many cases, a lot of home addresses of very interesting high-level people all over America, and in fact all over the world, and wrote them letters. And I didn't really expect to get that many letters back or calls back. But very slowly, I've got Telegram and Signal, the encrypted apps. I've got WhatsApp, which is increasingly less secure. I have Proton Mail. Very slowly, stuff started dribbling in. And sometimes people were talking anonymously, but it blew my mind because it made me realize you're absolutely right. There is an incredible story out there that is just bobbing under the surface of mainstream media coverage that nobody's looking at. Like, they're in the water, sitting above the water, looking at the sky and everything around them, but they're not looking under the water and actually digging. And the thing that blows me away is I'm so frustrated because people are probably going to find my book interesting, but I'm now going, oh, Christ, I'm almost embarrassed to publish it because I now know so much more since I started researching it. And now I know as I come out of talking to you, I'm going to find myself thinking, oh, Christ, why didn't I go down that path or that path? And the thing, though, that I've been really heartened by is the willingness of people to engage. And there's an exceptionalism about America I don't particularly like, but there is a beautiful willingness to share science and ideas and to have intelligent conversations that I really admire in Americans in particular. I've seen it everywhere else in the world as well, but there's a joke I've had many years that I think Americans have an extra strand of DNA. They understand the media in ways that other countries don't. And I think it's because they've had TV for so long. Mm-hmm. And they just get it. They deliver sound bites. They speak clearly. They kind of intuitively understand the importance of media. I think it's drummed into them in civics classes in school. Whereas, frankly, you and I used to be a Brit, and I know you used to be a Brit, and here in Australia we've got the same problems. The Brits try and classify everything. They are obsessed with secrecy, and if it's a menu in a restaurant in the middle of the Defence Signals Directorate in Australia or the GCHQ in England, they'll classify it because it might jeopardise national security. Whereas here in America, I have been blown away by the willingness of people at a high level in defence and intelligence and science to engage. And
I think maybe some of that comes from the fact that a lot of the core research for this was done a good number of years ago. These people, they've got their pension assured, and there's not much left of it to run, or some of them have got other means, and so they don't care. And they do realise that the information, it should be out there, and it's unreasonable for it not to be out there. And when I give you some more context about my story, you'll realize, I think, and I would hope you would realize, that you shouldn't fear giving the information out because it's actually our human right. It's as much as right to life and the pursuit of happiness.
I completely agree with you. The thing that I've had several people say to me, including a serving member of the US Defense Department, is it's outrageous that this has been kept secret for so long, and that there's no good reason for it to have been kept secret for so long. And indeed, what I'm wrestling with is
I can give you several, but pin that thought. But I can give you several.
Well, let's hear it. I'd love to hear your analysis.
Well, stepping back to where I was in the key points and the reveals that I want to give you, this individual, as I said, he had been a principal funder of the organisation, and in fact, in a couple of years, we could not have achieved some very significant milestones had it not been for his support. But that's not to take away from the literally thousands of people that have sent like $10. That adds up, and it makes it possible. And you run yourself lean,
Sure.
and so forth. And it's amazing what you can do. But also by being open and committing to try and finding a solution and putting the information out there. If you are wrong, you have the idea of the organization was that if you put the information out there, it's live and it's unadulterated. Most of these significant findings we've had in the first 4 or 5 years was from the crowd monitoring our data whilst we were asleep. They go, something happened at this time overnight, and you look at it and you go, oh my God, something really did happen, and what does it mean? And then you come up with a hypothesis and it's challenged, but the people aren't being paid to do that. And my father always said, a volunteer is worth 10 forced men. And it's absolutely true. A person who really wants to know, and they don't have to be asked, they don't have to be forced, they don't have to be under threat to find out the truth. They will just research and research and research.
It crossed my mind when I was reading about your group that it's a bit like a scientific Bellingcat. Are you following Bellingcat at all?
I don't, please.
Oh, well, Bellingcat, you should look at it. It's a fantastic site. It's kind of a journalist's wet dream. Basically, what they do is they use open source information. And one of the things, I was involved on the periphery of investigating the tragedy of the jet aircraft that was shot down over the Ukraine by the Russians. And there were a lot of Australians on board. And so we were desperately keen to try and prove and hear proof as to who the perpetrators were. And it actually was a plucky little Brit who, in the middle of some suburban town in England, sat down and started using things like, firstly, Google Maps. And there were a couple of social media photographs that he found of a Buck missile launcher traveling through the Ukrainian countryside. And he had dates. And then he just started doing good old-fashioned OSINT, open source intelligence, just going through that open source intelligence. And finally, one of the big breakthroughs that he got was he found the Facebook page of a Russian paratrooper who was operating this Buck missile launcher. And the metadata for the photograph placed him in the location where the missile was fired. And really exciting stuff. And a lot of that work has been done by people sitting at home on computers, nerdy types like you and me, who just basically sit there and go through data and find satellite photographs and telemetry that people didn't even know existed as ways of further proving a thesis, a hypothesis. And it's really exciting. And it struck me a lot of what you're doing with the project is very similar.
And there's less available information on data aggregators like that, but there is now a more than 3-decade extremely detailed set of papers. And whilst I think at the conference at ICCF 17 in 2012 in South Korea, there were probably 130 plus theories of how this worked. And many of the theories worked in different situations. So one theory would work with solid gas, one would work with gas, one would work with liquid gas, but they wouldn't all explain all of the phenomena. Yet you were getting, if you actually paid attention, similar transmutations in different systems. And so why isn't there not a common thing that's going on? And so on. So and it was clear that it was likely that people had certain threads were partially correct. And I said probably maybe 6 years ago that this will be the last great thing that's discovered by man, because everything else will be discovered by AI.
That's a big call. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Okay. Right.
Because when all the data is available to a machine, it can find the patterns almost immediately.
Yeah.
And the answer drops out of the bottom. So what we've been effectively doing is creating a hive mind, which is effectively learning all of the data, challenging it, and only the answer drops out the bottom. So we are intelligence before we get replaced by artificial intelligence.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we should be frightened of that, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I thought initially you were going to say that there were no more scientific discoveries to be made, but
No.
I agree. I think AI will probably crack it from this point on.
But fortunately, I think it has been cracked, and I think that's going to become increasingly clear. So back to my story. This guy, he kept telling me I had to go and watch the Serious Disclosure, and I thought,
not that Stephen Greer thing, really?
It doesn't matter. Listen, It doesn't matter, because I'm not into UFOs. I'm not thinking about anti-gravity. I'm not thinking about any of that. He just keeps on saying, you need to go and see this. You need to go and see. It's like a little birdie in your ear, you know. And I'm going, okay. And I actually run my life on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
But then I think late 2016, I thought, this really has implications for potential gravity modification. Why does this guy keep telling me to go and look at this series? And I actually didn't know it was. I can't recall whether I know. Maybe I did, that it was Stephen Greer. But anyway, I went and looked at it, and I go, well, I know how that works.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So, and it's like, now I understand it. But that is one reveal for you that I finally gave in to someone who is constantly being a little birdie in my ear, saying I needed to go and look at this. I needed to go and look at this. I needed to go and look at this. And at some point, it's like some point in the universe is channeling through him to tell me to do that, whether it's right or wrong. I at least need to give him the courtesy of looking.
Sure.
Now, what he didn't know is what I'm about to tell you now. He does know now, and in fact, he's the first person outside of personal family that knows this. And you are going to be the second. And everyone that listens to this podcast is going to be whoever they are.
I'm flattered.
Right. So the point is this: when I was 7 or 8, but your memories may or not be fixed on an age at that point. But I'm 49 now, so I would suggest at least 40 plus years ago, my father, who was he was a very senior Mason within the Masonic system. At one point, he said he was the most senior Mason in the UK. He was certainly beyond the Grand Master, but he was the oldest. I think he meant most senior, as in I'm the oldest at the moment that is a Grand Mason, something like that. He died at 72, so it's a little bit hard to believe. But you know, sometimes family members embellish things. But certainly, I knew he had been a Grand Mason, and he said for whatever reason that I was suitable to go into the lodge when I'd passed my 30th birthday or whatever. And I said, Dad, that's not my path. I said, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's not my path. That's exactly what I said to him. And so, having seen this documentary, having had this guy in my ear for years say, you must go and see this, you must go and see this. And you go, oh God, okay, I'll see it. I then have to tell you the story. And so my father, it was a late summer's night and cloudless sky. And my father asked myself and my family members to come downstairs. And we had like a big room which used to have our black and white TV in with the 3 channels and a nice open half fireplace where our dog used to set itself alight. And I'm looking out the window and he says, right, look up there. And way up into the sky, way beyond where the clouds would normally be, 4 lights go blink on, and they're in perfect equidistant formation. They go zip, zip, zip. And for those that don't know what I'm doing with my hands, I'm gesturing jerky, instantaneous moves to the left, to the right, to the left, or right to the left, to the left, right, depending on your perspective. And then they all blinked off. And he said, right, kids, you can go to bed now.
So, okay, now you've got me really going. How did he know they were going to be there?
That's the point. And you know, as a 7-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever, I never considered it. And in fact, I suppressed the memory. because I thought, what the hell's this? Well,
Yeah.
okay, all right, Dad, bye-bye, good night.
Did you ever ask him about it later on in life?
No, because it was like, could it be I mean, it obviously wasn't anything like a firework. It definitely wasn't planes. Nothing.
No, it's funny because the reason I ask is because there's a lot of scientific papers and people I've spoken to who tell me that they think that the phenomenon, let's call it that, has the capacity to muck around with our minds, that it has a psychotronic effect. It can actually influence our perception.
Right.
And it's really interesting because, I've often wondered, I've so many people I've spoken to, and I say to them, did you follow that up? Did you ask more questions? Did you go back to that person who told you about it and ask them more questions?
And it's no. The first time I questioned this was on reflection of watching the Serious Disclosure Project. You understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
I had
Stephen
not
Greer's
thought
done some
about
good.
it. So whatever you think about that project, and the people that came forward and claimed.
No. I mean, I actually admire the Stephen Greer Disclosure Project. I mean, I actually think that is one of the laudable things that Stephen's done. I'm very skeptical, sadly, and I deal with some of this in my book, about some of the later statements that Stephen's made, where I think I think there's a phenomenon in ufology of people who stick their heads up, and rather than what I love about your site is you are genuinely committed to knowledge and dispersing the science, and you're not an egotist. You're not in it for some narcissistic reason. So many people
definitely not in it for the money.
No, but so many people in ufology. I mean, I really hate these ufology shows that have sort of boom, boom, boom theme music and sort of try and dramatize everything. And essentially what we need in order to make people sit up and take notice, like you did after Serious Disclosure, is just simple information, clinically, objectively delivered in a clear and concise way that makes people go, crikey, there really is something to this. So what was it that you saw on Serious Disclosure that made you go, oh, okay, I might remember that incident?
I felt, whilst I can overreact, as any human can, and no one's perfect, and that's the case for Stephen Greer. I know I'm not perfect, and I've made mistakes. But my view is you work through the mistakes until there's no mistakes.
Sure.
And people like to point back into the past where you were wrong. And it's like, well, if you looked at where I am now, the past was an early part of the iterative process. That's like stopping an AI machine when it's only gone 20% through its calculation. And said, well, you've got the answer wrong. And it's like, well, I'm only 20% done. It's like you're building a building. You haven't put the windows into the
journo in me has to go back a while. Had your dad ever seen UFOs before? Had he ever discussed the phenomenon with you before?
I will talk about on my blog a wide range of very weird things that my father did throughout my childhood that allowed me to see what I needed to see to be doing the work that I'm doing now.
So do you think that he was able to, I mean, did you form the impression that he was in some way consciously connected with those objects, or was it a complete coincidence that he looked up at that point of the sky and said, have a look up there, you're going to see something? Because, I mean, what you're suggesting to me is
I never questioned it. I'm just saying what happened.
So but you've never questioned what. But what I'm asking is...
The obvious question is, how did he know it was going to occur to bring us downstairs?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
But all I know, for me, that was our sponsor telling me to watch the Serious Disclosure allowed me to reflect on what happened to me as a child. And right. when I knew that, I thought there is something here. And you know what? They were just spheres, glowing spheres. That's all they were. Now, when you're just seeing glowing spheres, it's not a light bulb. There's no clouds to reflect off. You know, when I'm looking at with my scientific analytical mind now, I can immediately remove from potential truths things that it cannot be. And then what you're left with is four things that instantaneously appear. They're equidistant. They move across the sky from from being at rest, instantaneously at fast speed move to another point and at rest. Then they move back to the original point and come to rest, and then they come back and then they disappear. And everything is so sudden. It's staccato. It's a musical term to say it's like beats.
But you acknowledge, don't you? It is very weird that as a little boy you had an experience like that your daddy showed you, and he obviously thought it was important because he called the whole family down, and you never forgot it, but you
suppressed it.
And it only ever came back. You really only remembered it when you watched Serious Disclosure.
Remembered it after watching the Serious Disclosure. And you asked me a question, what made you think? When I was looking at, as I said, I feel that I've been good at reading people. We had a hotel. Before that, we had a market garden. So we were, from an extremely young age, I was interacting with the public. And then we had a hotel. So this was before the end of the Cold War. So we had people from all over the world, just not from behind the Iron Curtain. And so I would pride myself in watching people coming up to the door that were driving and coming off the street and guessing their mood, where they were from in the world, whether they would be fussy about their room or whether they would be happy because you've given them good accommodation. And so just on the facial expressions and so on. And so when I've employed people for many years, and I've been able to judge their mood and, whether they're satisfied with the work they're doing and so on. You get it wrong sometimes. But anyway, the point was, when I looked at some of the people making the disclosure there, even with some of them, you can tell, if you're attuned to this, you can tell where they're telling the truth and where they're embellishing the truth and when they're flat out lying. And the issue was for me that there was enough people in that disclosure that looked like they were telling a genuine story.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I cannot discount it. Then I have to reflect on my own experience. And then I have to reflect on because this was in January of 2017, I had to reflect on what I'd been told about ball lightning in October when I visited possibly the world's expert, Dr. George Eagley, in Hungary, in Budapest. I recorded a series of interviews with him, which are published on our channel, and under Stardust is the 3 videos. And he told me certain things. Now, when I saw that documentary on the 1st of January this year, with my backstory and my understanding, I don't have to go through the mental barriers that other people do about this not being a potentially real phenomenon. I already knew all of my life, all of my conscious life, that something like is what's described in these ancient texts. And by these, I've only found out after publishing that video that the Hopi people have a whole series of legends that match what I'm describing is the technology. And I'm just saying, I've come from the technology, seeing the experiments, seeing the effects on different materials of this technology, what it does, and going, well, this isn't what you're being told it is. It is actually going on like this. And so when you look at what the Hopi people are saying, that apparently, I mean, I might get this wrong, but in their legends, they left the Hawaiian Islands rather. And they flew in flying discs, boats, and it depends on what class you were. You went in the anti-gravity craft if you were like the rulers, I guess, and favoured few. And other people went by boat and so on. They fled to South America, and then they were able to cut stones and build huge things with large rocks and move them around. And and he described the fact that you had like a 1-inch crystal that's in there. But when you understand that coherent matter can stay in materials indefinitely, and it can be re-excited, and it's the coherent matter that's able to envelop things, and when you're in that coherent matter, it loses its mass, charge, and inertia. So you have all of the principles in it. The problem is, for the people that have been restricting this, they're either too stupid to understand how simple it is, or they know how simple it is.
Okay, now let's stop for a moment, because there's so many ideas in what you've just taken me through there. But there was a line that you used there about the people restricting this. And this is where the skeptical me has to roll my eyes slightly as a journo, and I have to say, where is your evidence that this technology is being deliberately suppressed?
Okay, I'm going to give you two other reveals here. Two other reveals.
I'm doing well here.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I don't have a problem telling you stuff.
Sure.
That is my modus operandi.
I'm very grateful. Yeah.
You have to commit to have things come back at you in this universe. If you hold back, then you are not going to get the most out of your time on this planet. So,
it's very good advice.
When it was June the 6th, 2000, I believe 2017, maybe 2006, I don't know. Anyway, I was giving a conference. I was at a conference in Asti. They put me on what's called the graveyard shift, which is 9 a.m. in the morning. Everyone's at an Italian banquet till 2 a.m. in the morning. I couldn't be because I'm doing the first slot in the morning and I'm driving and I'm staying at different accommodation. Anyway, for various reasons, I came back to the hotel where everyone else was staying and I decided to finish my presentation through the night, just run it through the night until my presentation at 9 a.m. in the morning. And several people came back drunk. And I mean, not even a little bit drunk, because there was basically unlimited alcohol. And one person who you might suspect would be working for organizations that might already know this information. For 2 hours in saying X, Y, and Z, yes, it's good what you're doing with this, it's good what you're doing with that. But Bob, you know, my friends have seen the US anti-gravity craft, but don't talk about them. Do not talk about them. And I'm basically getting threatened. And it wasn't just him. There were other people that turn up to this conference every semi-annual period. And I had 3 people come up to me and warn me. 3 different people at the same conference. And then in Boulder, Colorado, when I was to give as far as I understood it, the most successful low-energy nuclear reaction data ever observed by Alexander Parkhomov. He's a fellow of the Royal Academy of Russian Sciences. I've been given this data. He wants me to present it. I turn up because of my experience previously. I turn up like with only 5 days notice. You know, because I don't know what's going on when I'm getting those kind of conversations being given to me. And people go, "Oh, you're here. What are you going to present?" I said, "Well, you know, I wasn't on the schedule or anything. I've been told there are slots free, and you know, you should go and ask if you can get a slot, one of these slots, because people have either had to bail or that, you know, for whatever reason there were slots free." So I went over to the organisers. And these people I know would be in the position to have known this if it was real, right? and moreover, they how do we put this? They are former members of an organisation that has published patents recently that claim to do many of these aspects of the same technology. So
it's the US Navy.
You could well be correct in saying that.
The Salvatore Pay patents
but
by the
they're
US
overly
Navy.
Complicated, actually. And I think that's the reason. As far as I'm concerned, when I read them, I go, well, what they're saying is possible, but they're obfuscating the simplicity that's necessary. It's like the Lockheed Martin patent that I found in the latter part of last year. I'm looking at it, I'm going, I know exactly how this is working. And if you didn't know, if you hadn't been through my journey, you would, and you were a top scientist, you would probably have a 2% chance of understanding what's being said here. The basics you would understand, but you wouldn't be able to relate the simplicity that's actually underlying this. So anyway,
but before you go into telling that story, can you make it clear? I need you to articulate for me, because I know your position. I just need to hear it from you. You believe this technology is being suppressed. Just explain to me what you believe is happening.
I'm just. You asked me, have you got any evidence? I'm giving you actual personal
So
experience evidence, and then you can draw your own conclusions as to whether that's sufficient.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
Okay. So at that conference, I went up to these people who were in a position to call the shots, having been directed to them by other people. And I said, oh, I've come with this data from Alexander Parkhomov. It's absolutely groundbreaking. Is there any available slots for me to present in? And there was this kind of awkward silence. One person looked to the other one. They had an interchange of their eyes. And then they looked up at me because they were sat down, looked up at me and said, I'm afraid we've got no spare slots.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I took that on good faith. The following day, a person I personally know very, very well told me, well, that's ridiculous, because after you were told that, I was asked to repeat a presentation I'd done at the previous conference. Right?
Just feel
then after the conference, I was told by another party who I trust, and this came completely out of the blue, right? I didn't ask him what the reason was. He told me that he was told that the reason was that they were worried I was going to talk about anti-gravity.
And were you?
No, I was going to talk about Parkhomov's data.
Okay.
Here's the thing. At that point, I thought, oh my God. Earlier in the year, I realized this technology couldn't possibly enable anti-gravity. I've had now both times I've interacted with senior members after I said that at the beginning of the year, and I only said it in a slide, sorry, in a video. I said it. I said this technology will allow you to float as if nothing, right? Like float in the air as if nothing. Okay. I said that was, I think, on March the 1st, 2017. So you got June the 6th, and then you got the conference later in the year. So the two subsequent occasions, I have an absolute panic, and firstly threatens and then panic that I'm going to talk about anti-gravity. And after I got told by the back channel that they thought I was going to talk, I thought, this technology is related to anti-gravity because they are fighting it so hard. Wait, here's the next data point. The next data point is, I find that Martin Fleischmann was investigating 4 technologies that are supposedly all related when he did the cold fusion announcement in 1989, right? This is an interview in Infinite Energy from 1996. I think it's 1996, but it's between him and Christopher P. Tinsley. I've done a video on it and the implications of this specific part of the video. Okay, when I was talking about other aspects of this technology and how it interacts potentially with gravity. Okay, and in that interview, he's asked various subjects. Now, Christopher P. Tinsley then goes to introduce the idea of anti-gravity. He says there, right? And then out of a 3-page transcript of the interview, it's the only time where you have Martin Fleischmann saying blah, 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 ... blah, blah, blah. They cut something out of the middle. And when you read what he says, it looks like they've cut something out that they didn't really want to make public. And that for me was, there we go. It is the same technology as anti-gravity. They fought so hard to prevent me talking about it. They told me what I needed to know. And so since then,
just explain this to me. Who are they?
They're people that follow around this science. And I don't see them ever doing any. Well, okay, that's unfair. That one of them does experiments, but they're kind of like on the periphery of it. They do paper reviews. The other
second question
pretends to be an investor, and maybe
second question: are they, do you think, government, or are they perhaps what I'm increasingly beginning to think, private defense, military, industrial, aerospace contractors?
At least one of the people in that story are pretending, or at least posing as an investor. Okay, another party has a proven record of military research. So, right. So you have two parties there. This is, even from the beginning of the project story, we had one of the original directors who was working in Switzerland, and at EPFL or something, the research facility there, and they actually have a research tokamak or something, some hot fusion tokamak. When they found out that he was looking into low energy nuclear reactions, they tried to remove him from the offices. Now, the thing is he wasn't working for the university. He wasn't a contractor or just a student. He was just renting space on the facility, on the overall space where this research is going on, and he's directly competing. And so they basically wanted to kick him off the site because they found out he was working on Lena.
Next question. If this is being suppressed, this technology, why?
I'll give you one very simple reason. In fact, I will find the slide, and it was in the Sun newspaper from 1911, and it was written by, excuse me, I burped, how rude.
That's all right, no problem.
Let me find it, because it's actually in that Nan Madol presentation, so I'll go and find it. But you can go and see it, and actually in the blog, I think I gave a link to the reference. I gave a link to a reference, so let me go and find my blog. That's probably the easiest place to find it from.
Sure.
So it's the Nan Madol post, which is that one. And if I go down to the slide, I can read the slide there, actually. In fact, you know what? I'm going to give you this so you can actually see what I'm looking at. That would be helpful. So what I'm doing is I'm sharing a link to my Nan Madol remoteview.icu blog, so you can review what I'm looking at. And essentially, it's the first slide that I shared, and I've given the link there. It was slide 26. I authored this in January 2018, but I only revealed it the other day. In fact, all these three slides, the other one is the second slide is from 20th of February 2018, but this one I had there from January. It says, how about aerial navigation, Dr. Tesla was asked. He considered for a moment or two and then replied with great deliberation. The application of this principle will give the world a flying machine, unlike anything that has ever been suggested before. It will have no planes, no screw propellers, or devices of any kind hitherto used. It will be small and compact, excessively swift, and above all, perfectly safe in the greatest storm. It can be built of any size and can carry any weight that may be desired. 1911. Tesla promises big things. The Sun, New York.
You still haven't specifically answered my question.
Here's the specific answer. If anyone could travel anywhere carrying anything faster than anyone could deal with them moving, and they couldn't even see them or track them because they're so fast, and because the technology actually masks most ability to track these things to anywhere in the world, and everyone had that capacity, how in the hell could you control humanity?
So it's a technology.
Why would anyone buy a flight on a plane? Why would anyone go through the hassle of troubling themselves with airport security? You're only going to blow yourself up, aren't you? So you're not going to be doing that. But you couldn't control anything. If you had, let's say, 1 billion of these devices, even that AI is not going to. You're going to need physical people, and
Sure.
if they see you are coming up you're coming to take them, well, you just get in your craft and you're on the other side of the planet in 20 minutes. It's completely. You could not stop anyone doing anything.
Forgive me for bullying you slightly in the questioning, but I'm really interested in taking you into different courses. Do you believe this technology has been constructed by either private corporations or the US government or any other government in the world?
What I know is this. I have been specifically targeted before I ever was going to talk about it to not to talk about anti-gravity. I then find out that the guy that I have dedicated my life to clear the name of and try and solve the energy problem was almost certainly investigating anti-gravity as part of a package of things that you need to think about when you are looking at this family of technology. Then you have my personal experience, and then you have people that are coming into my life, and I'm not asking them to, and they say certain things. There are. I think what you need to understand is that the world is more than the physical thing you see. There are spiritual. I lost my spiritual nature, having been a choir boy from the age of 5, when I started traveling the world, and I realized that most of the people in the world are not Christians, and how could I condemn them to hell and damnation when they're not Christians? But they do have commonality in their faiths, about how to respect others and don't do unto yourself to others what you don't want done to yourself in the Christian framework. But so there were threads. People came up with the idea of deity somehow. They did, and there are people that you see worshipping superstars or film stars or whatever. And you can understand how if someone was so impressive to you, like so charismatic, someone was so powerful in that they could do X, Y, and Z, even if you really didn't want to believe that they could be like a god, you would start to think that they were relative to you.
Mm.
So what is the nature of God belief? Now, on that basis, Tesla said he was being spoken to by aliens. He was getting a lot of his information put into his head. And he's not the only one. And it happens to me too. I came up with a drawing at the beginning of 2017, and I can't fault it now. It was at beginning of 2018. The structure that I drew, I'd not seen anyone draw before. And when I lay out the information over the next however long period it's going to be on my blog, the information is in the archaeological record. Every continent. I'm telling you, Ross, that this technology was as ubiquitous as people driving around in cars and using mobile phones. I said this to my mum last night. I said, look, when I look at my kids, they don't know a world where there isn't a touchscreen device.
Mm.
But the idea of even speaking on a phone to my friends at their age was an impossibility with a mobile device.
No, it's funny. I've been very privileged in my journalistic career to have travelled all around the world, and I think some of the most incredible things I've seen have been the Mayan ruins, the Egyptian pyramids, the incredible straight lines in rocks that I think we'd have trouble cutting even today, let alone 5,000 years ago.
Ross, it's trivial with technology. You know what a laser is, right?
Sure.
It's a coherent light energy structure. And with lasers, the photons do not have any mass. And still, you have commercial lasers that are able to cut through inches of steel. Okay? Now, go and watch my presentation if you haven't done already on coherent matter waves, which refers to the Lockheed Martin patent, which I only came across in September. And they are saying something very, very simple in that patent. This is the bit that anyone could get if they actually bothered to read it, which is this. Photons are the same. To make coherent light, you need all of the photons to be of the same frequency. Okay? It's like you've got 100 people singing in a church, but they're all singing the wrong note. They're all singing different notes. You don't get
harmony.
No, you either need harmony, but actually for coherence, you need the same frequency. And actually, you need them starting in the same phase. When someone's singing a note here and so here's the thing, if you wire up your speakers and you invert the plus and minus on one, there will be constructive and destructive interference in that state. And it's just a stereo pair of speakers, right? So you can have two people singing the same note, but if they are out of phase in that, then there are places in the room that will have no sound at all. It's the same way that noise cancelling earphones work.
Sure.
right? They listen to the sound and they do the antiphase. Okay, so you need to be the same frequency and the same phase.
Amplitude, yeah.
Right now, this is the revelation for me in September. The revelation for me is this: with light, it's easy because they're all a photon, so you just need the same frequency and same phase. But with matter, you need them to get them the de Broglie wavelength. So if you think of the particle, electron, proton, or sodium atom, or aluminium atom, or whatever, if you want to get that in the same frequency, you have to get it exactly the same temperature. And this is when people make coherent matter, they call it Bose-Einstein condensates. They cool it from whatever temperature it's at down to absolute zero, as much as they can. And what that does is it gets the same matter, say sodium 23 atoms, because all sodium is 23, so they're all the same, right? And it gets them all down to no temperature at all. So then they're all at the same kinetic energy. And then what you do, in that case, if they're in a constrained environment, they end up getting in phase, just like a load of metronomes do if they're on a metal plate, right? Okay, so this is how most people have explored creating coherent matter. But there's a thing that was discovered by Aronoff and Bohm in, I think, 1954, that you can change the phase of a frequency without changing its energy level. And it's the Aronoff-Bohm effect, okay? And specifically, this is the weapons that were built by Khrushchev in the Cold War. And Khrushchev, I think it was 1964 or 1974, they had a meeting with the Americans. And they said, we need to have a worldwide moratorium and just ban the development of these weapons. And these weapons are eternal technology. In fact, I would argue that all technology is eternal. You just haven't discovered it yet. And we are on a planet which is relatively young. It's 4 billion whatever years old. There are planets that are not that far away with conventional technology, but not that far away, that are 2 billion years older than ours. 2 billion. Now, where were we 200 years ago? In fact, where was I 4 years ago in my understanding of this technology? Now, if I studied for 4 years and realized within the first 20 minutes of watching that, my second Ancient Aliens from the most recent, well, last season's first episode, how Nam Adol was. How would I be if I'd not just got to the conclusion in 4 years? I'd had an extra 2 billion years to work it out.
Yeah.
And in those 2 billion years, I had AI on my side.
Now, can I just pull you back again?
Yeah.
I've never heard of this thing about Khrushchev meeting the Americans to discuss the suppression of weapons.
Tom Bearden's books here.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know whether I've got that bit in here.
This
is when I realized I should be writing a book, because I've done presentations for 20-something years. And Tom Bearden has just put a load of presentations and the speaker notes in and made books out of it. And they're quite successful. I'm thinking, that's easy money. It's selling old rope, isn't it?
Don't tell everybody, mate.
I read The Lord of the Rings and something else. Like I say, I run my life on a need-to-know basis. Now, the language in here is not so easy to understand, because it's they call it quantum potential weapons and this, that, and the other, and maybe that's the right phrase, and maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but you know, as a scientist, you come up with a model in your head that fits the pattern of data, and you give it. I'm not trying to make it sound complicated, so I go out of my way to try and make it simple. Like I described, you can cohere sound waves, then you can cohere light waves, and this is how you cohere matter. And actually, the point about that was that matter, light has no weight, and yet it can cut through a couple of inches of steel, right, straight. Coherent matter, using electrons, because electrons have 511 k electron volts or whatever, that is the energy that is converted from mass. That is literally, basically infinitely more energy because the photon has no mass. So even with just electrons, so the idea that you could cut absolutely straight lines. There were no slaves building those pyramids, and you can cut extremely straight lines through rock. And I know because these little things, which are being created just by self-organization rather than technologically deliberately made and then forced into a beam, like it says in that Lockheed Martin patent, which is the basis of the weapons that they're putting on the Russian next generation fighters with their own version of it. The next generation of American fighters, and as of this 28th of December, it's going to go onto the Japanese fighters. It's already almost certainly on the Chinese fighters or in the works. But
like a particle beam weapon, you mean?
They call it microwave weapons, but it's not. You could call it a maser, like a microwave laser, and they may actually have those weapons on there. But the prize, I mean, they might be selling them that because it's like last generation, right? But the coherent matter beams are exactly what Tesla's death ray was in 1932. Exactly.
Okay, that's right. Just to come back a bit, is it public information that there was some kind of an agreement between the Americans and the Russians?
I will try and get the slide from here. Anyway, the point being is this is fused quartz. You can see here. I'm showing him a picture of the Lion 4 reactor. And in other Lion reactors, that's what we call this type of reactor, these exotic vacuum objects are bored holes through the quartz. Now, they are just self-organized in the reactor core, and for whatever reason they decided that something was attractive outside of the reactor, and they went through the reactor and then bored a channel through. Now, if you're doing what is described and explicitly said in the Lockheed Martin patent, which is valid from 2013, they're saying you can make these beams, and then if you know one of these little things randomly can bore a straight channel through that fused quartz. Well, what is the granite made of?
Yep.
This is the technology that all megalithic structures were built with. It is the technology that all of them were moved with. And what you did in Egypt is you didn't have ready-made building blocks, but you did in Nan Madol, because you had these prismatic columns, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 tons. And even before I saw it, the legends on the island is there were these big birds, and they came out because the actual rock, 40% of it, they don't know where 60% of it came from, but 40% of it came from the top of a mountain 25 miles away. And it's 122 meters high, but so it's not really a mountain, but it's a volcanic plug, and it goes like this. It's got a kind of like curve like that, and I'm just describing the shape to Ross here. And it goes up, and it's nearly sheer at the top, and it probably went up higher because they've taken a lot of material off the top. These big birds came. When you fire coherent matter and you have something like this piece of iron, the coherent matter will organize itself around it, okay? And if you've got two on there, they will find a balance between themselves. They attract and repel. Feynman called this like, right? So if you have two of them, they will attract and repel. If you have three of them, they will find a new organization around this material. If you have 1,000, they will try and organize themselves all the way around this material here. Now, I've actually got a hexagonal section here. This is from a pen. I'm showing them this pen. It's just a standard sort of hexagonal section here from a pen.
Gotcha. Yeah. This
is exactly the kind of shape that one of these, and the aspect ratio that one of these prismatic columns on this island. It's called Pompeii, but not as in where the Italians died with pyroclastic cloud. Pompeii, as in it's called Pohnpei or something H or something like that, but spelled differently. If you can imagine, they're going all the way around this. Now, what I didn't know, but demonstrated before I knew this, is that these things wet together. When they get so close that there's no space for them to repel without hitting one on their left or right, or forward or back, or up or down, they will start to wet into each other like water droplets do. They have a surface tension. And I demonstrated that with a researcher in Europe called Henk, which we're currently doing experiments with. And then, after publishing those presentations, and after concluding that these are coherent matter, after that, I got sent a paper from Fusion Technology from Japan from 2001. And it was talking about the surface tension of what they call balls of fire. They call them balls of fire. Separately, I was sent another book about a research of ball lightning from a wide range of studies and even experiments I think that the author did themselves. And in conclusion, they made the conclusion that this points to new physics, it will have new applications, and there is coherent matter. It's specifically saying it.
If this technology exists and has existed in history, I can understand, for example, the United States wanting to suppress it because it doesn't want to give everybody else the same advantage. But if this technology is as simple as you say, why hasn't a Tesla or a clever Russian scientist, I know of Potklednov, for example, with his anti-gravitic technology. Why haven't these things manifested? Are you suggesting that even the communists and now the authoritarian Russians are colluding in the cover-up?
People's lives are short. Modern economies and even ancient economies are just, if you're in a basic economy. I mean, I lived in India for 8 and a bit years, best part of 10 years, and I lived as an Indian. I lived in the same kind of accommodation on the same kind of income because I was giving the rest of my income away to other people. So I lived and I realized that you're just getting by. You're thinking about your next meal. You're thinking about whether you're going to have a family, all the problems with education for that family, what their prospects are, blah, blah, blah. If you're in a situation where you have to be, Tesla specifically said he did not take a wife because he would not be able to concentrate on his work. Yeah, so okay, so those are the sort of family kind of aspects to it, and employment type of aspects. The other thing is, how did you start this conversation? You were saying, help me out here. Am I going out on a limb? You know, am I doing the right thing here? Give me some confidence that I'm doing the right thing. You have to commit, and you need balls to commit. You need to have guts.
Okay,
and
no, I accept
people haven't got it, and they will never have it, and they will give in. You know what I've had to face in this journey. You would not imagine what I've had to face. The amount of ways they've tried to get to me, offering me university. Why don't we can help you go to university? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a doctor before your name? I don't care. I actually do not give a about qualifications. I give about what you can deliver and the truth.
Okay, let's. I mean, how hard do you think it would be to create this technology to demonstrate the particle beam that you're describing, or the capacity?
Tesla did it in 1932. He tried to sell it, as far as I understand, to Winston Churchill, and it was, I think, he wanted 33 million. I don't know why, but which was a phenomenal amount of money today. But basically, the UK would have been impenetrable. But at that time, I think we were the only country. Britain was the only country in the world that had that amount of money that they could do with to buy anything.
And what did you suggest happened? Like,
people don't believe it.
Well, why didn't he build a working model and then fire it at the moon or say and blow a chunk off the moon? I mean, I'm just devil's advocating here, but I mean, surely the best way to demonstrate this technology.
But you have already seen this at work, and you already saw it replicated within 1 hour. I don't want to go into it, and I'm going to hold up something, and I'm not going to talk about it. But this is all the proof I need.
Right. Okay.
So, the point being is that when something is, honestly, Ken Shoulders invented the technology to make microprocessors. He is the father of microelectronics. We are able to have this conversation because of Ken Shoulders, right? Ken Shoulders invented the quadrupole mass spectrometer. That is how we can tell what elements are in our samples. Ken Shoulders was brought in by Hal Puthoff in 1981 to try and find out what John Hutchison had done. What had John Hutchison done? John Hutchison was trying to replicate things that Tesla had done as accurately as possible, and throwing in a load of military hardware that he had been given in compensation for decommissioning 3 Canadian warships. And these
an amazing story. I love that Hutchinson story.
These are frequencies that you are never allowed to buy. So you couldn't discover this with all of the time in the world, because you're not allowed to buy equipment that does this. And if you make it, you're breaking the law. So he has these things that can go into frequency bands that you can't use, ever. You're never going to discover it, ever. Given all of your life and all of your friends' lives, you're not going to discover it. And he's twiddling these knobs one day, and he gets hit on the back of the head with a lump of metal. Well, where did that come from? Well, there's no one else in here. Typical kind of poltergeist thing. I know I've got no poltergeists, and I haven't offended anyone. And there's no one else in this apartment. You know what I mean? So that started his journey. So he physically has done these things. And I can hold them in my hand and I can analyze them. And this aluminium doesn't sound like aluminium. And when you test it in Russia, it turns out to be elements that don't exist.
Well, that's the thing about the sapphire technology that amazes me, is it's transmuting elements.
Well, I met them at Boulder, and I says, you need to come out and just say it's transmuting elements, because it is, and I know it is, and it will be. And they did have the guts to come forward. They went quiet on it for a bit of period, and then they realized, as I know, that the thing is that this technology can do the easiest. If you're not very bright, the easiest thing you can do with this technology is blow up.
Yeah.
And you blow it up into bits that are smaller than red blood cells if you work it hard. The problem is that the harder you work it, you start creating elements that are not even in our near universe, which is what Stanislav Adamenko did. He created things with 455 AMU. I mean, they don't exist on planet Earth or in our solar system or near universe. And he did it with 1 to 300 joules with an electric discharge, which was 1/10 the speed of light through, and it's a dielectric barrier discharge, which is exactly what it says in the Lockheed Martin patent.
Okay, stop for a moment. Forgive me for, again, being a bit of a bully, and I apologize for trying to direct proceedings. I'm loving this conversation, by the way, Bob. It's great fun. If this is being universally suppressed, if there's collusion clearly between governments...
Sorry, it doesn't need universally suppression. Someone said this to me, and it's very accurate. You have these Agent Smiths that pop up. They don't need to be told to rubbish you, or to say you should be doing something else with your life, or this is obvious nonsense because everything I've learnt in school told me that this is not possible. Every single person on the planet is a potential Agent Smith. They are.
So you realise that sounds like You realise that sounds like conspiracy wacky nonsense.
Because it's not. No, it's not my conspiracy nonsense. Someone else told it to me, and it's an accurate description because I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it from family. I've witnessed it from scientists. By the way, these people have come back and apologised and said I'm right. But it took years for them to see the truth. You have the world's archaeologists and historians that don't have a clue how these ancient structures were built. But
I love Graham Hancock's work. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like people who say, "How can you believe this?" and then they go to church.
Yeah, sure.
Come on. I mean, it's like they have this bifurcation in their brain where they can only accept certain things because that's what the real problem is if you teach a human a framework which they can live by, then they don't want to waste any more breaths learning something else. I think it's in the Jewish text. They said, "You give me your child, and I'll give you back your man at 7."
If this is being suppressed by, I think to use the terms that you're using, you talk about Agent Smiths. I mean, essentially, you're not talking about a conscious suppression, apart from a few who are clearly in the know. It's more a public perception of that can't be possible, therefore it isn't. Is that correct?
Was it Isaac Asimov who said, like, if a technology is sufficiently
Arthur C. Clarke.
amazing, it would look like magic,
Yeah, Arthur
Yeah,
C.
well,
Clarke. Yeah,
yeah, Arthur C. Clarke. Lucky guy living in Sri Lanka.
it's a beautiful place.
It's like where I live, except it's civilized.
Yeah, yeah.
Relatively. I mean, obviously with the war and terrible thing there. But anyway,
it's kind of like a polite India, really.
yeah. That's basically what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can drink wine and have cheese and things like that. Anyway.
No, I mean, what hope is there, Bob? Just a devil's advocate there. If essentially the scientific establishment is so closed-minded that it's not even prepared to contemplate the possibility of
go around them. That's what the project's doing. Be the change you want to see in the world. Don't wonder why it's not happening. Get it done.
But what about, for example, I had the privilege of interviewing Elon Musk once, and it was hilarious because I had the feeling when I was talking to him that only about 1% of his brain was actually dealing with the interview and the rest of it was solving some amazing problem. He really is. He's some incredible intellect. He's a really impressive guy, but, almost on the spectrum in terms of how he deals with people, very impatient and intolerant of fools. But why wouldn't somebody like an Elon Musk, who's now about to become the world's richest man, why wouldn't he just have a couple of scientists to have a go at LENR? Are you saying that
maybe he is? Why is he going to tell you that? Maybe he is. He should be. I mean, for me, I consider, and no offense to Elon Musk, I think he's a bit of a joke, and I'm probably in the minority who are not worshipping him. He's achieved some amazing things. I like to watch. I mean, I got my whole family watching the launch of the first the two US astronauts that went up, and then I got them all. Even in the middle of the night, I had my kids watching it, and the landing of the crafts down because it's wonderful. But
it's
for
extraordinary.
Me, it's kind of toys compared to what people were using 12 and 20,000 years ago, and it's overly complicated. The technology that Tesla describes that I know can be realized, and which almost certainly has been realized, and was the technology that was realized, which was being discussed in the Sirius disclosure, and was likely the technology that I witnessed when I was 7 years old. These things are so much better for doing the things that he's doing. John Hutchison is here, right? Ken Shoulders comes in 1981-82 to try and find out what John Hutchison is. This is the guy that invented microelectronics. He spends 33 years of his life until he dies trying to explain what John Hutchison did. Now, what did he do? To find out what he was doing, he went back to a guy called Winston Bostick, who from 1949 to the late 60s, early 70s was investigating ion electron pairs being fired into a chamber over a magnet. And in 1957, he came to the conclusion that this explained everything you can see in the cosmos, the shape of galaxies, the formation of galaxies, and quite possibly, he said, that it explained everything down to the microcosm, atoms and subatomic structures, that how they were formed. And do you know what he was trying to do? He was trying to, under government contracts, work out what how the H-bomb could be converted into domestic fusion. He never mentioned Tesla in his works, as far as I can work out. But what he did say, and he said that we can travel to Mars extremely quickly using this technology. And he said that, I think, in 1959. It was some lecture he gave somewhere. So you look into the work of Winston Bostick. But he never mentioned Tesla. But he's clearly doing dielectric barrier discharges, which is exactly what Tesla was doing in his 1932 death ray, which was producing coherent matter. And Tesla described it as electric particles of matter. He didn't call it coherent matter because no one had come up with the concept of coherent matter at the time, but he realized what they were and what they could do.
Have you, I mean, obviously from the people that have confronted you at conferences and told you to stop talking about antigravitics, you've obviously formed a view that somebody on the planet in humanity has developed this technology, that we have working, operating antigravitic devices?
Um, I've been specifically told that some people have had, as I described you, the person warning me says that they know people, unless they're just lying or they're being bravado, which is possible. It's possible.
Sure. Mm.
But then you have all of those people disclosing, and you have a history, and you have Tesla in 1911 specifically saying you can do this. And what he's doing, Tesla was the guy that could make ball lightning. So I'll give you a couple of contexts of what's happened in the last 3 weeks. Last 3 months. We did these experiments, which are like Sapphire, but we wanted to do something more interesting. And there was when I was in Sochi in October 2018, a guy called Anatoly Klimov, he presented a presentation. It's available on our YouTube channel. And he showed some experiments, I think, that they were doing in the Soviet era in 1960s, 70s with microwaves. And they had these coils with a point in the microwave chamber, and they were creating plasmoids, which is the Bostik name, which was originally given to these features, on the top of every one of these spikes that was above the coil. Okay, and so I thought let's make some coils instead of just a spherical anode, and see what happens. Okay. And so we made it out of, he had some materials. He had some nichrome wire, like you have in a toaster, the heater element in a toaster. It's 80% nickel, 20% chrome, and mostly the rest of it's manganese and iron and stuff. And some tungsten wire. Now, between these two experiments, you can see everything you need to see to know that this technology is realizable, really. And in fact, you only need to watch about probably 40 seconds. And you have to recognize what you're seeing. Now, the context is this. In October 2016, I was visiting George Eagley, as I said, in Budapest. He spent 20 years researching both current, i.e. contemporary reports of ball lightning, where he would go and visit the person just after it happened. The electricity or the gas board or the water board phoned him up and said, this event happened, and can you go and investigate it? So he would take pictures and stuff. Okay. And he would also speak to people that had historical accounts of ball lightning. And ball lightning is a real natural effect, which, like the pyramids and like Nan Madol and like Machu Picchu, and they can't explain the old stuff. They can't explain how it was built. No one can explain ball lightning. The US Navy has tried really, 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 really hard. And in fact, in October 2001, they requested Eric, who works with Hal Puthoff, Eric, I can't remember his name.
Dr. Eric Davis.
Eric Davis, yes, to find out who in the world knows anything about ball lightning and report back. And they came back with these X, Y, and Z, and they said that there's two avenues to look down. One is the work of Ken Sheldon, who was trying to work out what John Hutchison did, who was trying to replicate what Tesla did. Tesla was saying that he was getting his information from aliens, right? Okay. And so anyway, and so it's all connected. It's all absolutely completely coherent story. Okay. So sorry, what was my point then? God, it was a very good point.
You were talking about the experiment that you did with the tungsten and manganese wire.
So he's telling me two anecdotes. In fact, these documents were then taken by the US government, and they've been declassified, but you can get them off his site anyway. And in fact, I think I have one of the two major reports next door here. He gave me two examples of ball lightning testimonies. One is, so firstly, just to tell you, this is a Hutchison sample. Okay. And this Hutchison sample has large chunk of quartz in it, has bits of plastic in it, it has lots and lots of spheres, and it even has something that looks like a geode in it over here, which is formed in it. And this was found growing by a large industrial capacitor in one corner of his lab, not in the active area. Now, I know that ball lightning can go through a window without making a hole in it. Sometimes it makes a hole in it. At some point, I'm going to explain exactly how that occurs, not now. Exactly. And there's two types of holes. It can make a hole round its coherent matter skin, or it can make a hole that takes out the whole sphere, the whole circle as it goes through. But often ball lightning would just go straight through glass, and there's a reason for that. But anyway, ball lightning has even been known to go into a plane through the aluminium skin and go down the aisle of a plane, right? But I'm going to give you 2 examples of ball lightning which tell you all you need to know in context of the videos that I've been sharing just before Christmas. One, this testimony was the ball lightning, wherever it was, they tend to float above the ground. That is very important. They don't like to, if they go to ground, they discharge, but they tend to float above it. They kind of bob around above it, right? But out of one of these ball lightnings, maybe it was destabilizing for whatever reason, a load of sand fell out. Another testimony is where there's ball lightning and it's floating around, and gallons, not a gallon, not a litre, gallons of water come out of it. So let's say it's 2 gallons. That's 9 litres, or if you're in America, it's at 8 litres because they get shortchanged, something like that. And you get water out. What is that telling you? It's telling you 2 very important things. I'll give you. Can you work out what the 2 things that are important in those 2 testimonies?
I cannot, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Got a plasma thing, right? I arguably think people think plasma is hot. Now, what I can tell you is that coherent matter can be formed at absolute zero. That's where it was first done in 1995. Now, coherent matter, according to what we've observed from Ken Shoulder's study, sure. and this is formed at room temperature. And coherent matter is forming in these reactors at thousands of degrees. What is the important thing? They are the same atom or the same mass structure, yeah, at the same temperature in phase. It can be at a googolplex degrees. It can be at room temperature. It can be absolutely no temperatures whatsoever. They just need to be the same temperature, same thing in phase. And that's exactly what it says in the patent. So these things can be formed in the atmosphere. Now, you can have a hot plasma and you can have a cold plasma. Above me, I've got cold plasmas in my strip lights. Okay, when I go and touch them, there's a little bit of warmth, but it's not going to kill me. You know, it's not going to cook my fingers. And there are specific cold plasma lights that you can have. Probably some computer screens have a cold plasma causing the illumination that illuminates the screen. Certainly old LCDs did. It had a little strip that illuminates the screen. So this is cold plasma. Now, if you had cold coherent matter, the point about this is when that sand is coming out, sand is often made of quartz, and it would normally sinter probably in the several hundreds of degrees, depending on what the constituents of the type of quartz it is, if it's got impurities in there. Like soda glass would typically melt at around about 300 degrees. So you know that it's most likely not above 500 degrees. But the water's interesting because the water should be boiling if it's a hot plasma. But it's not a hot plasma. It's not a hot plasma. Secondly, if the sand is coming out, it's not affecting that thing. Now, what do we know about ball lightning? They can walk through walls. They can walk through glass, and they can walk through aluminium. Now, why is that important? Because Ken Shoulders established that exotic vacuum objects, which Takaaki Matsumoto, myself, Ken Shoulders, and pretty much everyone else will agree that knows this, they form 2 structures. They form a sphere, they form a toroid. What is important about those 2 structures? They have minimum surface tension, and they have a single surface. These are exactly the structures that Tesla used in his Tesla structures. It's either a sphere or a toroid. Why? Because you have no sharp points, and so you can build up the charge as much as you possibly can, right? These are the fundamental structures of nature, the torus and the sphere. Okay, so they can form into these structures. In fact, you could argue that the torus is just a load of wetted together spheres on their magnetic field lines. So it's like, anyway, the point being here is that I'm getting to, and I will get to it. The point being is it's masking the gravity, the mass. They're not falling to ground. If I put 2 gallons of water, 2 meters above the ground, you would expect it to fall to the ground at some point.
Sure.
If I put a bag of sand and let go of it, you would expect it to fall to the ground. But it didn't. It's floating around. It's floating through a window. So what you are seeing is things that are so unbelievable that people have physically witnessed, right? And it is this technology. It's the same technology. The reason you get a glowing toruses or you get glowing balls on these anti-gravity craft is because it's exactly this technology. And what is ever in that coherent matter sphere, Ken Shoulders said this. He said this, and I've got a transcript of his interview. He was dying. He was riddled with cancer. He was dying in 2013, but he had this interview. It's the only public interview that's known. I fully transcribed it. And in the second part of that video, he says, this technology screens charge, mass, and inertia. What is the technology? It's a coherent matter sphere or torus. They can arrange themselves whatever they like, and I told you they can wet themselves, so they can cover this prismatic basalt column to build our Nan Madol. And in fact, there's a very large, I think in Sumatra or something, or in Indonesia, there's a very, very large pyramid that's built also from prismatic columns. And if you didn't have a large workforce on the ground with all of your coherent matter cutting tools, you would just go and find the nearest prismatic column deposit and you would use that to build your structure. It's just what you would do. It's just what you would do. The largest population on Earth was in Arabia at that time. So you maybe China too, but because whatever. So the point is this: it's anti-gravity, and it's proven anti-gravity. This technology allows you to walk through walls. It allows you to carry any mass, just as Tesla was saying in 2011. Tesla was not lying when he was speaking to the sun, and and Tesla's known to create ball lightning. He's one of the few people to have known to create artificial ball lightning at that time.
Why was this technology lost then? I mean, if the ancients discovered it,
the flood. Some people speculate it could have been an asteroid impact. It could have been a solar flare that flashed water from the oceans and melted the ice caps. And within a day or two, you had sea levels rising hundreds of meters plus tsunamis. And it would have washed the thing clean. This is something that I worry about if this technology is used ubiquitously, because it interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. If you were to have a war using this technology, now, this is a reveal I'm giving to you now, and I am a clairvoyant. Okay, I knew when I was 4 that I would be doing this work in my 40s. I knew. I had a recurring dream. I said, I'm going to have to do something. I have no choice. I will have to do it. And you can see my testimony. It's my first testimony on my blog.
You're not the first clairvoyant I've met on this little adventure, I can tell you.
Well, I can tell you. I have a recording of Alexander Shishkin, and he's saying that I'm getting these things in my dreams, and it's not mine to keep. I have to give it out, and that's exactly how I feel. I do not have a right to earn money from this, and it causes me all kinds of problems in my life. But the thing is, if I accept some money from someone where they're telling me what I have to do, I'm then not being free. I then can't receive this information because I'm not receiving just and doing what is right at the time. I'm being told what I should be doing, and immediately I'm being pushed away.
Can I ask you this? Do you think consciousness is part of this phenomenon?
Absolutely, 100%, certainly, and I will argue that case in the coming year or years. And precisely the mechanism, I will argue.
Can you explain at least some of what you mean?
You can make coherent matter out of anything. You just need the same temperature, the same phase, and the same matter. Okay. There is a form of matter in the universe. This is based. I'm going to give you. This is another exclusive for you. There you go. Ta-da! Let me see if I'm still recording this, because I'm not very good at what comes to me. I'm not really allowed to give to anyone as a one-on-one. So I have to publish this basically immediately.
I understand. That's absolutely fine. I've got nothing to hide myself. Yeah.
After the birth of the universe, if you believe that story, but it doesn't matter because these things are created from supernovas. You do not need a big bang for these things to be created. But there's a paper that I shared 2 years ago when I was preparing to translate this book, Space Earth Human, which will explain the science. This is Alexander Parkhomov's book in Russian. You can get it. It's actually still discounted on Amazon store. But this explains how he discovered this form of radiation. And he actually, his fourth chapter in the book is most interesting because it's how he learnt the technology to be able to discover this form of radiation. And what was he doing? It's called Where Physics is Powerless, right? And what was he doing? He was running the equivalent of the program that Hal Puthoff was running in the US on the psychic spies.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's the same technology. It is conscious controlled technology. Look, listen, this is a demonstration I have to people, right? And for the people that can't see what I'm doing, I'm flinging my hand up in the air. This bag of that I'm having my mortal experience in is a conscious technology. It's made of the same stuff, and it's controlled by in the same way. The problem is we are imagining ourselves as the boundary of what is possible, and we have to physically do things. But that's not the truth. And you know, after I presented that Nan Madol presentation, and I said that in this book by Takaaki Matsumoto from Hokkaido University, he discovered that in his palladium deuterium reactions, he found that if he cut open, can you see that there?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
If he cut open his electrodes, he found these things disappeared in the middle. And when he looked at it under the scanning electron microscope, he found these spherical sections removed along the crystal grains. It starts off small and then it gets bigger, right? Mm-hmm. And he concludes that these are microball lightning. And in 2001, he concedes that they were actually exotic vacuum objects, as Ken Shoulders had discovered. Although he didn't discover it, he just named it.
And forgive me, just explain that to me, the bear with the very small brain. Why is that significant?
The concept is here, and he's drawn it out explicitly. It starts off with a few of them on the crystal grain boundary, and it grows to surround the crystal grain, and then it'll actually eat it away if you keep it going, right? This is exactly what's happening when I'm lifting this crystal out of the mountain. The things go round, they grow, you get enough of them, and so that's that. So after I gave that presentation about Nan Madol, someone sent me something that was declassified on the CIA archives about Jack Hoke's work on spoon bending. Okay, because if you look at my presentation, you will understand I introduced the concept of spoon bending, but in a different context. It's to do with an ancient temple which I used to live 2 kilometers away from in India for a couple of years. Right. But you can see that on that presentation. But the important point here is I didn't know this, but what they found was when they analyzed under a scanning electron microscope the pieces of the spoons or the metal that had been bent, they found that something had happened on the crystal grain boundaries that had caused them to slip and become like a fluid. But it's not a fluid, because these things are able to cause metal lattice electrons to lose their rigidity. So it becomes, in the case of what Tom Bearden says in here, when the Soviets were doing it, becomes like a wet noodle. You can make a nail turn into a wet noodle. And he actually describes it here. Softening of metal at a distance was one effect used. Okay, so an example of Russian tech. This is on page 12. The book was originally published in 1986. An example of Russian tech. Some years ago, coordinating with Western but non-US aerospace firm, I furnished the firm with the names of addresses of some Russian scientists in Moscow, since it was clear from their internet site that the scientists were on the fringes of the KGB energetics weapons program. An excellent European engineer fluent in Russian was sent in several times. Several unusual things were demonstrated to him, including transmitting enormous energy down a very thin wire. That, and in fact, I have a video of this, and they tried to sell it again later. They used a Tesla coil with a spark gap, and down a 8-micron wire, they transmitted something like 25 kilowatts. An 8-micron wire, 25 kilowatts. But why? Because you make it into an exotic vacuum object. The exotic vacuum object uses the wire as a guide, because it likes to be in the metal, not in the air, because that's a barrier in impedance. So it likes to stay along the wire, and it's trying to find ground, which all through these tungsten light bulbs, there's ground at the other end. And as it goes through the inductor in the tungsten light bulb, it causes a slight dishevelment of the structure of the exotic vacuum object. Also, the exotic vacuum object's coherent matter interacts with the tungsten, which I've demonstrated many times through historical and our own work. It gets eaten with these things, producing vast amounts of light and transmutation. And that's been observed by the Sapphire Group when they had a tungsten meltdown. And that makes it glow. And so that's the one thing. The second thing is this: cold molding, or turning metal into liquid at room temperature, pouring it into a mold and then letting it sit and harden, all without heating. Now, what have you got in quartz? You only need to be resonant with the quartz. Quartz is silicon and oxygen. Silicon is a semi-metal. If you know what you're doing, you can take your little metal rocks, carry them up a mountain, put them into a bag, make them a liquid. They're not hot. They're not even going to burn the leather bag. Let's say it's leather, right? And then you set it in place. Or if you want to get a perfect scene between two rocks, you use your anti-gravity with your cone-shaped hand tools to move it into place, and then you use your coherent matter wave beam, and as you're lowering the rock, you go, and you get an absolute thing that you can't put a fag paper through. When you understand the technology, it's trivial. These technologies are trivial. And if you don't believe me, believe that Lockheed Martin, Ben Rich, in 1994, he was dying from cancer. That's when you start to tell truths, right?
Yep.
I think it was UCLA lecturer or something. He'd just retired 2 years previously and was the second and longest serving director of Lockheed Martin. He says, anything you can possibly imagine, we already know how to do. We know how to take ET back home. That's a weird phrase as it is, because it implies ET's already here. Who is ET? Are we ET? Are we ET? What is the missing link? Hello?
Sure.
Did the Sumerians really take hominids and put some of the genetics in? That would have been a hard argument 30 years ago. It's not a hard argument now, because you can go on eBay to do CRISPR.
I think you're absolutely right. What I have trouble with, I wrestle with the fact that as a journalist, pretty much every dirty secret has a way of wriggling out into the open. I find it incredible to think that a secret like this has been kept.
It's
not just
too
by
unbelievable.
Not just by one government, but by all governments, by all scientists. I mean, sooner or later, somebody would blab.
Look at Tesla. As soon as he had discovered X, Y, and Z, he wanted to bill millions. $33 million in the 1930s or whatever. That is unimaginable amounts of money for someone to ask. He was recognizing the value. The UK would have been impenetrable. There would have been no blitz. There would have been no V1s or V2s. Probably America would have never gone to the war, to the moon, because Werner von Braun would have never gone back and made some fireworks to get up there.
Yep.
Apparently, I don't know, but apparently Werner von Braun in 1937 was working at Los Alamos using Tesla designs to anti anti-gravity craft. And then he went over and carried on the work on the Foo Fighter program, which is interesting. It's called the Foo Fighters because the Foo Fighters are the dragons that stand in front of the Forbidden Palace Imperial Hall that I witnessed when I was 18. And they have an exotic vacuum sphere object, the structure of it, under the dragon's right-hand paw. And that temple dragon, or Foo dog, is based off ancient Indian temple dragons. Or dogs.
Look, I'm not saying no, Bob. I'm not saying no.
You're in danger of becoming an Agent Smith, and then you will have explained.
I guess it's just I just know. I mean, one thing I know as a journo is it's almost impossible to keep any secret. I mean, even the Manhattan Project leaked.
It hasn't been kept, and I tell you why it hasn't been kept. That paper that was declassified in 2003 that I referred to earlier about Jack Hook's work and the analysis and finding the effect was on the crystal grain boundaries is exactly what I see in this sample from John Hutchison, which looks like a mountain made of prismatic basalt. And it's exactly what is being observed by Takaaki Matsumoto here. Exactly the same thing. This is in aluminium. Takaaki Matsumoto was observing it in
But it's, can I just double check though? It's implicit from what you're telling me, and I need to get it from you explicitly. There are a lot of people, the majority of people who are stopping this technology from manifesting itself in the public arena are people who just have a mental block about it. They refuse to accept that it's even possible. But you're suggesting that the people that shut Hutchison down and others, the people who are threatening you appear to be suggesting that there is a conspiracy, that essentially there's a group of insiders who are gifted with the knowledge.
I was specifically told by someone who introduced himself to me as someone who worked on black projects, and who not only worked on black projects but did work, and that work, just as he got to the point of it being a useful technology, someone would come in and say, sorry, you can stop working on that now. We're going to take that from it. And this is the story he gave me, right? This is the story he gave me. Now, the guy's freaking bright, right? And I had no reason to disbelieve him. I recognize that many of the people that have reached out to me have some military or security services connections. I don't give a shit. It's the truth. Because I'm not about to kill myself. I have no reason to kill myself. And you know what he said? I think it was in September or October last year. He says, I went to a military conference, and they all know about your work. And says, this is what he wrote. He says, don't worry. No one wants to kill you because they're using your research in their own fusion research.
Yeah. But what hope is there, Bob? I mean, accepting what you say, what hope is there? I mean, what's going to happen to Sapphire?
Because I'm a credentialed journalist who's been accomplished. Okay, I'm assuming that your bio is. I'm taking it at face value because I only saw your bio 2 days ago and I didn't bother to read much of it. That was enough. I don't mind talking to him. My point is to get the information public, right?
Sure.
So you might be the best journalist ever. You might not. I've never read any of your books. I'm just so what? But what I've learned in this process is every opportunity has had a positive outcome, even if even if it looks like it was negative at the time. I don't know what's going on, and every time I feel I've had enough, I'm fed up when I was rich and of now being poor and having to deal with all the problems of being poor. I'm fed up with that, and then I think maybe I could do something different. I go, I can't, because something comes in to remind me. Something comes in to remind me, and it's not a subtle reminder. It's so unbelievably blatant, and I will talk about these on my blog. You will not believe the level of unsubtlety that the universe kicks me back into doing this job. It's bloody horrible. It's you cannot deny it. And I've had in 2 occasions, I've had a witness to the event, and it's like it's just freaking spooky. It's just beyond spooky.
Do you think that in your or my lifetime we're going to see this technology?
Yes. Sorry. It is already realized. It's already been realized in the past. It will obviously have been realized on any of the planets in our near and far universe, because the technology is universal and it is eternal. And so I will talk about how even if you can only travel at 0.8 of the speed of light. So in 1992, the CIA debriefed some Soviet scientists. This was published in January 2017 on the CIA's website, and I published it on our Facebook channel, and I've analyzed it further in other videos. And it talked about extracting. They were saying that cold fusion is this technology, but it's a bad way to do it. They said it's about extracting the hidden energy within matter. Okay. Now, nuclear is just about changing a little bit of the organization of nucleons and getting a vast amount of energy from the binding energy difference. Okay. What this technology does, if you push it too far, is rip matter apart. It turns it into light and neutrinos and basically light and neutrinos of various flavors, and electrons and muons and tauons, but then they decay back to electrons and electron neutrinos and stuff. So it rip matters apart. By the way, it can go the other way. It can go the other way. It can use any energy and go the other way. That will be an argument I'll need to make a lot further down the line with the evidence. But this technology is all there is. And what happens is people that touch on one aspect of this technology, like the energy or the AG or the walking through walls or the destroying, what they get absolutely megalomaniac. We have an inbuilt self-destruct called the ego. And the ego is out there to destroy this technology from people. This has been said in many ways, in many texts. If you're not worthy, you're not going to be able to benefit from it. And you're probably not going to benefit from it anyway. I've known all my life this is going to be no good for me, but I have no choice because it is a human birthright that we know what this does. It's a human birthright. And we, as a species, have used this, and it's been a blissful time on our planet. As I said earlier, if we weaponize this and use it in a war, there is a risk we will decouple the crust from the magnetic core, because principally this technology works on it's always magnetic. So the way something can walk through something else, firstly, you're not falling through that chair and falling into the earth under gravity because of charge. Your electrons are repelling the electrons on your chair. Now, if you're in a bubble and it's still you and you're in that bubble, and that bubble is coherent matter and it shields your charge, and the exotic vacuum object has gone into dark mode and it now has no charge, you will fall through that chair and you'll keep going until you're on the other side of the planet. Hello, Ross. Thanks for coming over. You become transparent.
Yeah.
The technologies that this releases are freaking mind-bendingly likely to be abused by bad actors. So everyone has to know about it at the same time, and they have to know its truth.
When you meet the scientists that are working on different parts of this technology, have you met any who are completely across the full implications of all of it individually?
No. Ken was, and Ken specifically did papers on various aspects of the technology and what it could do. And
okay, but if it was as simple as Ken and you believe it was, why didn't he create the technology? Well, he had the labs. I've seen all the videos about him. I mean, I'm just devil's advocating here.
Testimony. He didn't have the balls, and even his research gave him cancer and multiple forms of cancer. So when you have an exotic vacuum object and it can walk into your body because it doesn't see anything, and it gets excited by a specific element isotope in your body called potassium-40. The potassium-40 releases 1.331 mega electron volt electrons, and those rip your matter apart. Now, in Russia, where they've been properly thinking about this since 2009, and they had a team working on it, they have shown that mice exposed to exotic vacuum objects released from a cavitator prior to being exposed to radiation that would accelerate the production of melanomas, found that it suppresses the melanomas. And the reason is because the strange radiation, which is the form of this coherent matter, stimulates the production of white blood cells. So when you then get exposed and there's some bad stuff going on in your body, they deal with it, right? Because you've got a higher amount of them. If you expose after, it accelerates, because this technology accelerates life. And in fact, it is the path to slowing down and accelerating life. The problem is when you're in one of these spheres, the spheres, in my view, and I will argue this, and I will argue this from the physics, time stops. The world can go on around you. Time stops, which means you can go into the future. You understand the implications? You could have a nap in there. You can have a nap in there, have your 8 hours rest, come out, and you're 8 years younger relative to everyone else. The implications of this technology are so frightening to so many people and so unbelievable. The other thing is there are unimaginably scary things which you shouldn't do, and the spirit world does not like it. And I won't go into that. but there's things you can do with this technology that you shouldn't do. I mean, that you might want to benefit from, but you shouldn't do it.
Why is the spirit world, if, as you say, it is clearly engaging with humanity, why, I mean, the experience that your father described was clearly spiritual.
It was freaking weird when I reflect on it now.
Sure.
Yes.
And look, I mean, I don't know whether you've followed Stephen Greer's CE5, where they talk about meditating and attracting the phenomenon. And on numerous occasions, and I've seen it myself, people meditate and they seem to have a capacity to attract the phenomenon. I've seen orbs, I've seen glowing objects or lights manifest themselves over individuals, or display on the horizon, and wink, and in fact respond to a torch.
Well,
it's a spiritual
thing.
The thing
is that you okay? So this will be a blog article, and it has physical replicatable data behind it. But essentially, Ken Shoulders says you emit these things all the time out of your fingers. All the time. And not just when you're having a physical spark, but he describes it as when you're having a physical spark. So every spark, wherever it occurs on in the universe, will have an exotic vacuum object at the front of it. Even lightning has a ball lightning that you may or may not see that causes the ionized channel through which the lightning then discharges. Okay. So there's always this exotic vacuum object leading the charge, as it were. Okay. Now, the interesting things about the exotic vacuum objects that come out of your fingers, they are quantumly entangled with your consciousness. They are quantumly entangled with your consciousness, and they can affect physical matter.
So you're talking about healing and all manner of manifestations.
When you understand that, all sorts of things that I thought was bullshit for all of my life and would mock, and I need to reflect on that for myself. I need to reflect on why I dismissed things out of hand. When you understand that the technology, as Shoulders said, is ubiquitous, and it is. But we are bags of that are spiritual containers that can we are literally designed to work with this technology. We're a spiritual container because it doesn't matter whether you start with light elements or you start with really toxic radioactive super heavy elements. This technology reduces it down predominantly to the elements necessary to support our makeup. And look at my presentation to the Stanford Energy Group, where I was invited by Carl Page, Larry Page's brother, in 2000, at the beginning of January 2017. And I talk about the ball lightning, and I think I mentioned in that, but I certainly mention it another time. But I think I mentioned that the elements that are produced are like 98 point something % of the elements that your body is made from.
So what's going on?
What's going on is we are rediscovering something that we probably rediscovered at least twice before. And sometimes the beauty of real technology is it's normally quite simple. But sometimes you have to produce ridiculously rude Goldenberry or whatever is complicated versions of it before someone gets it down to its essence. Ken
So do you think
in 2006 said the Egyptians definitely could do this because all you need to do this is beeswax and copper. And we already know they had the Baghdad battery from 5,000 years ago. So we know that this technology was possible with the things that we know that were around 5,000 years ago. We know.
Okay, I take your point, but what I'm trying to figure out is whether we're ever going to get it seeing the light of day in our
You're seeing it right now. It's being put into airplanes to go and kill people. And it's commercially being sold. And it's based on a patent that tells you exactly what it is. It's look, when people are saying, this is what we can do, this is how we do it, and we're selling this commercially, you have to start believing them at some point. You have to start believing them. And bearing in mind, that's 2013. That was 21 years after Ben Rich left Lockheed Martin. 21 years. And there's absolutely no... no shadow of a doubt that most of this technology was relearnt by Tesla, but didn't know what was what. And it was codified by the end of the 1950s. And that same Eric Davis study from 2000, commissioned in October 2001. In that same study, he says, yes, the way to go and research this forward is Ken Shoulder's work, and the other one is work from the 1950s and 60s conducted by the US Navy, and they don't declassify it in the declassified paper. It's the only thing they don't declassify. When I realized at the beginning of 2017 that they already know exactly how this works, I was gutted, because by then I'd already given up my job, totally changed my life, and it's a sham what's going on. It's a sham. They want to keep this birthright from you because you're too stupid to think it's possible.
And I'm just trying to understand their motives. Basically, it's a technology that would essentially remove the capacity for any country to be dominant on the planet.
Or if you kept it to yourself, or you had a club, you could completely control people, because you could turn up in their house through their wall, give them cancer in a few seconds without them even waking up, because you could use a thing that has less battery than my phone does, create exotic vacuum objects, shoot them into someone's brain, and they would have terminal cancer within a few days. They wouldn't know you came in. There would be no entry points. They could arrive from any point in the planet extremely quickly. They could even dress up in silvery suits and make out they're some freaking aliens.
So do you think it's a government thing? Because I don't.
I'm not into that kind of conspiracy. What floats my boat?
No.
How does this work?
I'm not inviting you to speculate on conspiracy. I'm inviting you.
We actually are. Do you think?
No. I'm inviting. But I'm inviting you to talk about from what you've heard from people who are actually studying the technology. Do you get the perception that the primary research is being done from within government, or is it being done by private corporations?
Well, Tesla.
The reason I ask is because
Tesla
I think
was a private individual, okay, but he worked with various organisations during his time, okay. John Hutchison tried to work with various military organizations in Canada and in America. He went to Germany, he went to Japan, he was in Austria. So he went around, and many of them were military, because at that point, that was where all the money is. And to be honest, that is where all the money is. And so Lockheed Martin didn't do this out of charity. They didn't think, oh, we're gonna spend a few $100 billion on researching this stuff just because we're interested in it. No, but the reality is, if you actually believe it's possible, and you can look at the archaeological record and the human evidence that's set in stone, it's literally set in stone.
Yeah.
Am I keeping your wife awake?
No. I think I might need to pull the pin fairly soon, because it is getting very late here. Okay. You've given me so much to think about, and it's quite exciting, because I would love to have a further conversation where you maybe get into my head about who are the good people to speak to. You've mentioned a lot of names of people who you've engaged with in your research. I mean, obviously I want to talk to Childs and Claridge from Sapphire, but I'm really interested in
well, you know who their top consultant is? Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, I know, that's what worries me.
They've self-admitted they're working with the CIA, and they've given them classified patents to work with.
So are we going to see the suppression of the technology at some stage, do you think?
I fully expect some plates to be spun.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worry. The worry is,
I think Montgomery Childs is genuine. He's a religious man. I'm not a religious man, I wouldn't say. I say through working with this technology, I've regained my spirituality. I would say that a religion that was invented so that a former king of my country could divorce a wife is what I should be following necessarily. But
Yeah.
you know, it's just so farcical. It's like it's like a football team, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
But definitely it's game most, and also it has made me not fear death at all, which is quite important when you are talking about this subject.
I think
Because there's
right.
always some loony out there that would be willing to, you know, I used to know some people who could get anyone offed for about 50 quid, 50 English pounds. That is the price of your life in the UK. So, you know, I'm only ever being protected by the will of the universe. I fully recognize that.
It's extraordinary.
I mean, when I was offered $50,000 in 2017, in February or whenever it was, somewhere, to go and write the X Prize for, as far as I was told, a group of Silicon Valley head honchos for the energy side of this technology. And I would $50,000 for 6 months' work. I desperately needed the money. But if I had done that, I wouldn't have done the most important research that led me to understand the truth of the situation. And in rejecting that offer, which would have been extremely good for my family, and would have been on a family level a very good decision, but I would have been literally selling my soul without knowing it.
Yeah.
Been selling my soul, I would never have been able to tell you what I've told you today. It would not have been possible. 100% certainly. The things that were done in 2017 were foundational. And I said that I did not want to find myself with 2 holes in the back of my head from 2 different guns in a kind of suicide. Because shit happens like that in the US. Yes. And it's not like whether you think that's overreacting, it doesn't matter. Because I'm here to do a job. I've known it all my life, all of my sentient life. And I have no choice. And I can't put that at risk for just being able to eat slightly better food, live in slightly better accommodation, and keep those around me that want more in their lives in a slightly better level of comfort.
Good for you.
Because I might end up dead. I might not have even got the first paycheck.
Yeah.
And instead, I met the most amazing people.
Yeah.
And absolutely to have predicted the way that this does and say that in front of the nuclear authority in that Mumbai University, and then the person in the room that isn't about to mock me or can't understand the implications comes up to me, taps me on the shoulder and says, we need to talk. And I meet in the following day. And things that I predicted that could happen with this technology, I see within 24 hours into his lab. I take away samples, and they're my first samples that I witnessed strange radiation from.
So if an Indian scientist has done this, why hasn't India produced the technology?
No one would believe him. No one would support him. He had to pretend you can see the whole story laid out on our Steam It and on YouTube channel. He had to pretend that he was doing the work that he was respected for and became one of the biggest in his field, which is ultrasonic technology, principally for cleaning. Okay, he had to pretend that to get a loan so that he could conduct this research, because he saw transmutation happening with his ultrasonic treatment systems. And so he then pursued for 4 years and created 3 different systems that were producing transmutation.
So hopefully we're going to get to the stage where this technology can no longer be suppressed, with somebody like your good self spreading far and wide the knowledge of the technology.
Well, it dawned on me also in 2017 that the internet is definitely not the place to do it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Why is that?
It's the place to try to do it. It's the place to engage with people, but you need the record. You need the record that no one cares about since 1986, that no one cares about since 1993, that no one cares about. You need that record so that someone like me or you that for whatever reason is motivating you, whether it's money or just curiosity, or you've done all the normal stuff as a journalist and you want to do something that really breaks the boundaries because you've had enough of doing the normal stuff.
I'm a bit like
Whatever is
you.
motivating you, need these records done by people who saw parts of the story and put it into written word.
Mm-hmm. I think I need to go away and read those books. Hey, Bob, I'm going to call it quits for now because it's getting pretty late my time.
I know.
You have been incredibly generous with your time. Thank you so much. And I'm probably going to go away and do an awful lot of reading. You've given me about 20 different references, and I'm going to go away and do all that. And hopefully the next time I come back and talk to you, I can speak some of your language. But thank you for sharing your gregarious enthusiasm for your subject matter.
Some people don't necessarily, and you've been very good. Some people don't necessarily respond to my dramatics, but I was on the stage of it about from about the age of 4, and I before I left the UK, I was doing 3 plays or whatever a year. So when I'm making a forceful, stressful point, I'm using the ability to control my voice to make the importance of the message heard.
Can I tell you this? I'll leave you with this thought. I have met more people, myself included, in this, right through this whole phenomenon, this technology, the study of UAPs, and they're all driven by the same inexplicable obsession. Once you get your hooks into this subject, it's impossible to get out of it.
I say to many people, firstly, I knew I had to do this. I knew you got it. Sorry. I knew I had to do this from an early age. I didn't know what it was, but I definitely knew when it happened. But we took our first experiment that produced excess heat was our second experiment. The first experiment that we tried was with Francesco Celani's wires. We tried to do what he was doing next, not what he did when he created excess heat. We tried to go where he was planning to improve to, but it failed. So we went back to what he showed would work. And on the December the 12th, 12 minutes past 12, 12 seconds past 12 minutes past 12 on the 12th of the 12th of the 12th,
wow.
We started an experiment, California time, that produced excess heat 2 days later. 12.5%. It would have been better if it was 12%, but it was 12.5%. And I presented that on the 14th in a military base in Rome. I flew, and after I gave my presentation, a general came up to me, ran up to me, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he says, "You need to add an alkaline metal."
Wow.
And then he ran off. No, he didn't run off. I said, "What, you mean like lithium?" He didn't say anything. He ran off.
Fantastic.
So you tell me whether people know about this. I don't. The project had only started 2 or 3 months before, and I'm already having seasoned generals giving me advice. Now, I don't think they're necessarily the best scientists, but they might have heard something in a briefing.
Bob Greenyer, thank you. We'll talk again, my friend. Lots of love.
Bye,
Keep that enthusiasm going. Cheers, mate.
Not going to stop, mate. There's nothing more interesting in this universe that you can study. Nothing interesting.
I completely agree with you. All the best, mate. See you.
Bye.